Hi, folks. Welcome. Just starting to let folks in. So it'll be just 1 minute before we get started. This will allow everyone to go ahead and get into. We'll give it just 1 more minute until 12:35, and then we'll get started. Looks like we still have folks coming in. And I know that there are also folks joining us on the Power for NM Facebook page. And hey, well, great. Halito Chimachukma. Hi, everyone. My name is Sasha Anderson. I am excited to be here on behalf of the coalition, who has done so much work to move the Climate Solutions Act forward, and we are just so thrilled about the legislation. I am going to now turn it over to James Poviwa from the Center for Civic Policy to give us an introduction and rundown and framing of what we'll talk about.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today as we celebrate the progress of a bold piece of legislation, HB 9, the Climate Solutions Act. My name is James Poviwa, and I am the Policy Director for the Center for Civic Policy, which convenes the Power for New Mexico Coalition. First of all, I want to thank our champions on this legislation, Speaker Egoff, Representative Rubio, and Representative Stansberry, for their hard work to address not only the significant climate issues that our state faces, but also the equally significant economic needs of disproportionately impacted communities across the state. HB 9, the Climate Solutions Act, is a continuation of the work our state needs to engage, not only to take bold actions to address the climate crisis our families are living through day to day, but also to create avenues for hardworking New Mexicans to be part of the evolution our state will go through. These steps include diversifying local economies, creating high quality jobs in clean energy, and having every resource that disproportionately impacted communities need to successfully take advantage of the upcoming opportunities in our state's clean energy future. New Mexicans are shifting how we think about climate justice. The Climate Solutions Act represents a holistic approach to securing a cleaner, healthier present and future for all of our families and children. The legislation is a step toward merging the very need to act swiftly on climate change with the very real needs of our community members to be supported and ready to successfully transition and fully participate in the clean energy economy right here at home. And that is why it is so important that today we not only hear from our legislative champions, Speaker Egoff and Representatives Rubio and Stansberry, but also center community voices that are directly impacted by these issues. Sasha?
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it. So now we are excited to move to the Speaker of the House, Brian Egoff, whose leadership we so appreciate.
Thanks, Sasha, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin, of course, by thanking the entire Power for New Mexico Coalition, CCP, Center for Civic Policy, Natural Resources Defense Council, New Mexico Cafe, the NAVA Education Project, Somos un Pueblo Unido, and of course the sponsors of the bill, Melanie Stansberry and Angelica Rubio, who are doing a great job getting the bill put together and pushed through the legislative process. Everyone is committed to getting this bill over the finish line because we know that a just transition to a clean energy future is essential for New Mexico, for the nation, and for the planet. The Democrats in the House are committed to just that, namely a just transition to our clean energy future. We started it 2 years ago with the passage of the Energy Transition Act and are picking up the work to get to the next stage, bringing clean energy and reduced CO2 emissions to parts of our state's economy outside of electricity generation and use. We know that bold action on climate does not need to come at the expense of lives and livelihoods, that we can have both a prosperous economic future and a future that is based on clean energy and on reducing our CO2 emissions. The Climate Solutions Act gives tools to state government and tools to every community in New Mexico to determine their own economic future. The guiding principles that you find in the Climate Solutions Act are meant to empower communities to develop solutions that are right for them while still making progress towards reduced emissions and a clean energy future. We are once again leading the nation in the approach to clean energy and emissions reductions. We led the country with the Energy Transition Act 2 years ago, and now with the Climate Solutions Act, we are using a homegrown New Mexico designed and built piece of legislation that we think will make a big difference, not just in our emissions, but in showing the rest of the country, once again, how to get these issues on climate and just transition, how to get those things done correctly, how to get it right. We saw over the weekend in our Energy Committee here in the House a lot of conversation about what New Mexico can do to achieve global change when it comes to the trajectory of climate change and climate disruption. And I think the answer is that if every government, if every state, if every country only acts when their actions alone will be the single solution for climate change, we will never have action at all. It has to be a collective effort where everyone pitches in, and as Representative Stansbury said on Saturday, where everyone pitches in and everyone does their part. And this is New Mexico's way of doing our part to address climate. And we hope that especially our neighboring states will see that you can make this kind of just transition. You can involve communities of every type from border to border. You can do this work and still have a prosperous economy that works for everybody. So I think our contribution is in terms of not just emissions and in clean energy, but in showing other states how to go down this path in a way that brings all of us together towards a brighter energy future. So we look forward to getting the bill heard in its next committee and over to the Senate, where we hope it'll speed through the process there and get to the governor's desk. We have a lot of work to do. We don't take any votes for granted, but we're feeling good about this, and hopefully we'll have a virtual signing ceremony sometime in the next few weeks from the governor's office. So Sasha, back to you. And again, thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. We so appreciate it. Now we're going to go to Noah Long from NRDC, who can talk to us more about the climate aspects of the bill. Oh, and no, you're.
How about now? Is that better? Great.
Great.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you so much to Speaker Eagle for his amazing leadership on this effort. Thanks also to James, the folks from CCP and the Power for New Mexico Coalition. My name is Noah Long, and I'm the Natural Resources Defense Council's Climate and Clean Energy Western Director. And again, I'd really just like to thank the sponsors, the leadership in the House and the Senate, and the many, many New Mexicans who are standing up for actions on climate and supporting HB 9, the Climate Solutions Act. The Climate Solutions Act is another inspiring example, as the speaker said, of New Mexicans coming together to solve problems. The impacts of climate change are already upon us, and our energy economy must and is transforming towards a clean energy future. And New Mexicans are working together for a more just and equitable and sustainable New Mexico. Folks from all around the state and all walks of life are working together on this legislation. This bill builds on the amazing work of our governor to tackle climate change starting with her executive order just a few days into office, building on the Energy Transition Act and so many of the impressive regulatory programs that our state is putting together. By putting binding limits on greenhouse gas emissions into statute to ensure that our state government has the authority and the mandate to institute permanent and durable reductions in climate change emissions and pollution. The New Mexico Climate Solutions Act codifies and expands on New Mexico governor's climate strategy, building on her executive order and setting a target of 50% emissions reductions in greenhouse gases by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. It'll direct the Environment Department to implement regulations that'll ensure those reduction goals are met and that New Mexico is protected from the worst impacts of climate change. The bill also ensures, and I think this is something that really stands out for this bill ensures that the prioritization of the state agencies in working to implement the law is to focus first on disproportionately impacted communities and improving air quality in those communities, and listening to those communities and developing policy on climate and on clean energy, and also on establishing policy and solutions for a just transition with the direct engagement of those community voices. So for all of those reasons, the Natural Resources Defense Council and I myself are thrilled to support this legislation and to work on it, and look forward to seeing its passage in the coming weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Noah. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to move to Nena Benavides, who is going to read a statement on behalf of Cristina Estrada of New Mexico CAFE. Cristina is a member of CAFE Acción and resides in Catron County.
Hi, I am Nena Benavides. I am the community organizer for Grant County for CAFE Acción. I am not the person giving Tina's statement at this time. I'm going to give that over to Alex Luna, who is also a member of CAFE Acción.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, hi. On behalf of Tina has grown up in a rural community all her life. And in this time and space of seeing that the lack of economic opportunity have come in within Grant County, working in the restaurant association, working as a delivery driver. And right now, the only economic opportunities that are seen here is either working in retail or continuing to work into the mines. We need to create further economic opportunities that allow our families to be able to work and live in dignity, as well as having an alternative to our economy that gives the future of our communities an opportunity to not just have a shovel, but to have a direct pathway for communities to live with dignity and to making sure that economic opportunities are invested. Rural communities are often left behind, and we want to make sure that we have the adequate investments to expand job training and development, to making sure that we invest in alternatives to oil and gas, as well as within mining as well. Please make sure that we pass HB 9, making sure that we create a vast and economic future that is green for our communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to move to Atza Chavez of the Nava Education Project.
Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Atza Dawn Chavez. I'm Diné born Furquiwa Pueblo, living in Tewa Lands in Albuquerque. I'm the executive director of Nava Education Project and a member of Power for New Mexico. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak here. I think one of the main things from our perspective is that the real consequences of environmental racism. There is a long history of our Native communities being disproportionately disadvantaged by the extractive industry. It is our land, our land and our water and our air that has been most directly affected by these particular groups in these areas. They've been harmed in ways that cannot be undone. However, with the passing of this bill, we can begin to move into a just transition and begin to move towards a clean energy future. Our communities know very well that over dependence on revenue from the current and future the over dependence on revenue from extractive industries is an unsustainable model for our current and future generations. And together, we are striving for a clean and prosperous future for all New Mexicans, one that respects our hardworking families by allowing them to be a part of the process for change. HB 9's just transition language allows us to move in this direction. And it is vital that we put Indigenous and Black and people of color and BIPOC and other frontline communities at the decision-making table to inform this transition as we move from our energy economy, from this extractive industry, into something that is much more sustainable for our communities and our planets. The children in my background picture here are asking you to support HB 9 because they know that it's good for the environment. It will reduce pollution where they live, and because it ensures a livable future for them all. We owe them a chance at that future. And the task is simple. We have to act now. We've been kicking the bucket down the line for so long. And the people who have been most affected by these plummeting revenues, this hazardous environment, and the ecological destruction that has been perpetrated by this extractive industries in our state, those voices are the ones that need to be prioritized and heard in exactly how we make this energy transition, because we want to make sure that these communities are not left behind. Our Indigenous families who've spent their lives working are being impacted by these extractive industries. They deserve to have a say in how we shape this future. And we want the power to dictate the future for our children in New Mexico. We are a very small state, but we are mighty. We have 23 tribal nations, caretakers of the Mother Earth, that can lead the nation in preserving our planet and the move away from oil and gas. I know it's a scary thought, but frankly, we're here today because we failed in the past to diversify our economy to the point that we have become addicted to this one industry. One that has sacrificed our health, the health of our families and our communities. There may be symptoms of withdrawal, but we are going to require rehab as we move away from oil and gas. We can't continue to enable those who are supported by oil and gas dollars to prevent us from a future renewable energy. And that begins by respecting our community's history and tapping into our homegrown talent of people who are caretakers for our planet, who know and have ideas on the direction we need to move forward. And I'm excited about the coalition here in this Power for New Mexico because it's based on us coming together as community and how we can all look together to work towards a cleaner and stronger New Mexico. And we look forward to that opportunity. And so I invite anyone who has questions on this bill to reach out to me. I'm happy to sit down and talk to you, community leaders, tribal leaders, anyone out there, because this is something that's going to be so crucial for our communities. So I appreciate the time to speak.
Thank you so much, Atsa. We really appreciate it. Okay, fantastic. So now we are going to move to Gladys Saucedo from Somos Un Pueblo Unido. Gladys is a member of Somos Acción and joins us today from Hobbs, New Mexico, where she has lived for the last 16 years and is currently raising 3 children.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Gladys Saucedo, como ya dijo. Yo soy miembro de Somos Acción y Power for You Mexico. Y vivo en Hobbs, Nuevo México, ya por 16 años. He criado a mi familia con 3 hijos aquí en esta comunidad. Somos Acción es la organización hermana de Somos Un Pueblo Unido. Tenemos más de 3,000 miembros, trabajadores y familias inmigrantes. Estamos en 8 condados, incluyendo en Lee, Chávez, Roosevelt y Curtis. Apoyamos firmemente la HB9 porque en nuestra comunidad del sureste dependemos de la industria del petróleo. Es la única fuente de trabajo, pero cuando el petróleo cae bajo, nosotros no tenemos un sueldo entrando a nuestros hogares. Pasamos por tiempos difíciles económicamente, pero por eso a nuestros miembros creemos que tenemos otras fuentes de trabajo y el entrenamiento necesario para los trabajadores y nuestros jóvenes ayudarían mucho a nuestras familias. La industria del petróleo dice muchas mentiras. Una de ellas es que pagan muy bien a sus trabajadores. Eso no es cierto. A la mano de obra principal no le pagan lo suficiente por las largas jornadas de trabajo, y este ingreso no es fijo cuando disminuye la producción. Así que no todo lo que dice es verdad, y el estado de salud de los trabajadores sí es muy fuertemente afectado, ya que su estándar de vida saludable es de 50 años más o menos. Yo no soy experta en la salud, pero veo cómo los hombres que trabajan en los campos de petróleo se enferman más que el resto de la población, y también mueren más y se accidentan mucho más. La ley de solución climática aseguraría la supervivencia de nuestra comunidad. Sabemos que poco a poco se va a ir disminuyendo la producción del petróleo, y esta ley irá desarrollando otras formas de trabajo y planes para nuestra comunidad dependiente de la industria. Nuestra comunidad tendrá trabajos aquí mismo, y nosotros queremos seguir viviendo en nuestras comunidades que hemos fortalecido a través de nuestra lucha y trabajo. Los trabajadores petroleros y sus familias merecemos una transición justa. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you, Gladys. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaac de Luna, and I will be translating Gladys's statement into English really quickly. And it says, "Good afternoon. My name is Gladys Saucedo. I am a member of Somos Acción and Power for New Mexico, and I live in Hobbs, New Mexico. I have lived here for 16 years and have raised my family with 3 children in this community. Somos Acción is the sister organization of Somos Un Pueblo Unido. We have more than 3,000 members, workers, and immigrant families in 8 counties around the state, including Lee, Chavez, Roosevelt, and Curry. We strongly support HB 9 because in our Southeast community, we depend on the oil industry. It is the only source of work. But when oil falls low, we don't have an income coming into our homes. We went through difficult times financially. That is why our members believe that having other sources of work and the necessary training for workers and our youth would help our families a lot. The oil industry tells many lies. One of them is that they pay their workers very well. That is not true. The main labor force is not paid enough for long hours of work, and this income is not fixed when production decreases. So not everything they say is true, and the health status of our workers is very strongly affected, since their health standard of living is about 50 years or less. I am not an expert in health, but I see how men who work in the oil fields get sicker than the rest of the population and also die younger and have more accidents in their workplace. The Climate Solutions Act would ensure the survival of our community. We know that little by little oil production will decline, and this law will develop other forms of work and plans for our communities who depend on the oil and gas industry. Our community would have jobs right here at home, and we want to continue living in our communities that we have strengthened through our struggle and work. Oil workers and their families deserve a just transition. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gladys, and thank you so much, Isaac, for your translation. We really appreciate it. I would just like to ask all attendees before we move forward into our sponsors to go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A box in the bottom. We'll have some time for questions immediately following, and would love to get your questions in front of all of our panelists. And with that, I am excited to introduce Representative Angelica Rubio. Thank you so much, Representative.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you, everyone. It's good to see everyone today. My name is Angelica Rubio. I represent District 35, which is here in the city of Las Cruces. I'm fortunate enough to be working from home and away from the Roundhouse, which has always been a petri dish for disease. And so I'm grateful to be here today. I am also very, very honored to be here and representing the countless communities who have been a part of this journey that is now House Bill 9. A couple years ago, I helped elevate and find money to pay for a workforce study that was conducted by the Department of Workforce Solutions and the University of New Mexico, which was concluded this past summer, and is really the framework behind so much of the worker-focused legislation that exists within this piece of policy. This has been years in the making in terms of really amplifying workers and their efforts all around the state who have not been who have not really been prioritized by industry. I was born and raised in the southeastern part of the state, which we all know as the Permian Basin. The majority of my family still lives there, is directly or indirectly impacted by the volatile industry that is oil and gas. And it wasn't my intention moving into the legislature to be so outspoken about these issues, but so many of the stories, many of whom you've already heard today with Gladys and Atza and others, who are communities on the front lines who have been directly impacted by the economic instability as well as the public health and climate issues, is very much of importance to me. And I am incredibly honored to be able to be a voice in this policy, and welcome folks to join us as we move this legislation forward. As Speaker Egolf mentioned, we have a really great opportunity to pass this bold legislation, and it is incredibly important for us to stay laser focused, especially to make sure that a lot of the language that protects workers and makes sure that this economic inclusion is stays on this legislation is really, really critical. And so I thank you all. I thank the speaker. I thank Representative Stansberry and the countless organizations who have been a part of this work and who have really impacted me and my efforts within the legislature, and really showing where it is important to provide a voice for our communities. And this is certainly at that center of that. So thank you all. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today.
Thank you so much, Representative. And now we'll go to Representative Melanie Stansberry.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and thank you to everyone who is attending today. Congratulations. We passed this bill out of House Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources on Saturday morning with a due pass 7-4 in the affirmative. And I especially want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who came to testify on behalf of the bill. It was by far the largest committee hearing we've had to date so far this legislature in our committee. We had over 100 people polled in favor of the bill, and dozens of people who came to testify and to share their stories. And I especially want to thank the folks who are involved in community organizing in our communities and who are working at the grassroots level, who came to share your stories and to talk about the bill. So my role in all of this is largely kind of on the technical side, because I do a lot of climate work. And so I want to just provide a little bit of context for what the bill does, how it's structured, and what we're trying to accomplish with it. So this bill is really organized in such a way to help put New Mexico on a path to a zero carbon future by 2050, and to help lift up and provide the space for our communities to help plan for a more diversified, a more equitable, and a more just economy, both at the statewide level as well as within communities. So the way in which the bill approaches doing that is it sets an economy-wide set of standards around carbon emissions. So it sets net zero by 2050, a 50% reduction by 2030. It helps to institutionalize the current climate task force that the governor has organized under her executive orders, and much of the work that is already being done through that task force, but creates a whole new piece to that cabinet level task force that's really focused on just transition, that's focused on our communities, that's focused on giving them a seat at the table to help plan for our own collective economic future, that's about affirming culturally, environmentally, and socially just ways of building out our economy. And so this is, as Speaker Egoff said, we're leading the nation in putting comprehensive legislation together that addresses our carbon footprint, that helps to provide a statutory framework to help our communities be more resilient, and to provide the institutional framework to empower our communities, give them a seat at the table, and give the resources and tools to help voices, science, and our communities lead in planning for a more just future. So we're so thrilled, we're so excited, as a number of folks have talked about. This bill still has a long path, but hopefully not so long, because our legislature isn't that long. We will be headed to state government as our next committee, and then on to the Senate. And we need your continued support. We need your continued engagement. And we love, and it's just so beautiful. I truly was so touched to hear the testimony of everyone who came and testified this weekend. So thank you for sharing your voices. Thank you for your incredible work, and let's do this.
Yes, let's do this indeed. We're so excited. Thank you so much, Representative. And now we'll move to questions. Again, if you have questions, please go ahead and drop them in the question and answer box below. So we'll go ahead and get started. Assuming the passage of the Green Amendment, how will House Bill 9 expand on the climate policy implications of the amendment?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I know a number of people are asking how the Senate Joint Resolution, which is being called the Green Amendment to our Constitution, would work. So when we amend our Constitution, in general, it's sort of setting a high level policy for what the fabric of our state government is tasked with doing. And so the joint resolution that's currently in the Senate really provides provisions in our Constitution that would protect the environmental rights of the citizens of this state. Now, that amendment has to pass both chambers and then ultimately be placed on the ballot before it takes effect. But it provides one tool in the toolbox for there to be a legal basis for enforcing our rights to a clean environment. What our bill does is provide the statutory and institutional and governance frameworks to actually address climate change and a just transition in New Mexico. So in the same way, for example, that we have provisions in our Constitution that provide for all of our students receiving a fair and equitable education, we have our education statutes and policies and framework that enable our public schools and our educational infrastructure to actually deliver that education. So the pieces articulate to each other in that way. And I saw another question in the chat box about the other provisions that are related to clean energy and climate change. And we are doing our due diligence to make sure that the way this bill is drafted is that it provides the sort of overarching framework, as somebody said the other day, that wraps its arms around all the other good climate and clean energy and environmental provisions out there, so that this is the governance framework within which all these incentives and programs that are helping to advance clean energy can move forward. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Great. So the next question has to do with education. Does the bill include provisions for education that will allow workers to transition to green jobs?
Thank you, Sasha. I can go ahead and answer that. So part of the framework that we're working off of in this legislation, as I mentioned, is a study that was conducted by the Department of Workforce Solutions. And we can certainly put that in the chat and share it with folks if folks want to review. It's super long and heavily detailed and a lot of technical details, but essentially the Department of Workforce Solutions has already begun to work and to hear from communities, particularly around vocational and training programs. The economic inclusion subgroup that is within the legislation, and my apologies for my dog who is barking at the mailman, but the economic inclusion subgroup is really going to do a lot of work to provide a strategic plan that has already begun to take shape within the Department of Workforce Solutions. So the study, which was carried out by UNM, it laid out a series of recommendations, whether it had to do with accessibility, collaboration amongst educational institutions, and language access to ensure that communities who are directly impacted especially in those areas where we're heavily reliant on oil and gas production, that those communities have the resources that they need to be part of that energy future that many of us are describing. And lastly, with the Department of Workforce Solutions and the Environment Department, and amongst a lot of different departments within this legislation, because we want it to be cross-sectional, is that that there's a lot of investment within our state that they provide the resources needed for education and training to make sure that we're not only looking and searching for upcoming jobs in clean energy, but also making sure that we're taking care of our environment as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think that we have a couple of questions about jobs, and I think you've maybe answered them, but if anyone has anything to add, I'm just going to read the questions really quickly. What jobs will be able to replace the high-paying oil and gas jobs in the near future? And then how will House Bill 9 create jobs? Is it realistic to think that there will be enough jobs in alternative energy or other areas being explored to diversify the economy? And I don't know if anyone has anything to add, or Representative Rubio, if you'd like to take that.
Yeah, I can add to that. And I think this is one of the questions that I think we hear more often, which tells me how narrow-minded we are in the state when it comes to jobs. We need to think beyond energy. I mean, I think that is the ultimate goal here in this legislation, is that because we have been so heavily impacted by the energy industry in the state and our reliance on this industry, on these industries, that it's really hard for us to reimagine something different. What House Bill 9 does for us is not only provides a framework for what a transition away from those industries looks like, but also thinking about what type of economy we want to create in New Mexico that is beyond those jobs. So when we're talking one for one, it's impossible to say what those jobs will look like, because we've never had this opportunity to think about economic diversification in our state. And so this legislation, this policy provides us that opportunity to really create a roadmap beyond energy, and to think beyond what I think many of us are really able to do. And I really want to celebrate the communities that are being impacted by these industries, because they actually know what it could potentially look like. I mean, that is what the spirit behind this legislation is that you have these powerful ideas from these communities who have not only created work to create this legislation, but are also thinking beyond just energy. They know that they're resilient enough to understand that they have talent beyond our imagination, and that is what we should be focusing on.
And I'd love to just add on, if it's okay. I love the comment that Angelica, that Representative Rubio just made about thinking beyond energy, because if you really read the bill, and I really encourage people to do that, because there's so much in there, you know, we're talking about like creativity is the limit. New Mexicans are just such incredibly creative and resilient and ingenious, and you know, we have so many different kinds of communities in our state that are steeped in such rich culture, that are tied to the land, that have amazing histories of music and art and culture. And so part of what we're trying to do here is create the institutional framework to lift up communities and provide tools and resources so that they can reimagine their own futures. And those can be anything, right? And that's how we diversify our economy, is we build on the strengths of our communities and build those strengths out so that people can thrive and build livelihoods. So that's part of what I'm so excited about in this bill, is that it's not just about energy and about climate change, but it's about the future of what kind of communities we want to have.
I love it. You guys are getting me so fired up, even again, for this bill. Thank you so much. So there's another question. Is there consideration for gender justice as the most impacted by climate change, and for Indigenous collaboration in the energy transition?
Yes. And looks like Representative Rubio wants to answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, really, it's just the way, it's simply yes. I mean, I think part of the mechanisms that exist within the legislation to provide opportunities for leadership development in the sense of like really getting community-led members to participate in these groups is going to be critical, because it's issues like that that we will want to address. Again, I think part of what's so critical about the DWS study being a part of this framework for this legislation is that so many of our communities were over 1,800 people were interviewed all over the state, and so many of the thoughts and ideas around racial and economic justice and how that's centered in this legislation, particularly when it comes to the gender justice issues that you're describing, are very much a part of everyday experiences that people have shared throughout this work study. And so much of what came out of that is very much part of that equity lens that has been applied to House Bill 9.
And I would just add on top of that, that the bill itself actually provides a definition for disproportionately impacted communities, which includes tribal, rural, communities of color, and calls out also people of color, immigrants, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people, people with disabilities. So there's a very comprehensive and all-encompassing definition actually written into the bill itself to ensure that we're really thinking about and looking through economic development and this just transition through that justice and equity lens. So yeah.
And James, did you want to add something there, or was it covered?
We agree with both representatives, and yes, the definition is very robust and is looking to ensure that BIPOC community, LGBTQ community, that it's robustly defined and mentioned throughout the bill as having a seat at the table.
Thank you so much. So we have another question. There's a nonprofit, locally grown power /CHERP, CHERP, that sets up local solar panel manufacturing cooperatives in distressed communities. Could this bill assist with bringing in a job creating organization like that? And if so, how?
So I'll take a stab, and unless Representative Rubio would like to go first.
Go ahead, Melody.
Okay, so the bill itself is really about the governance framework and creates the places and spaces in which communities would come to the table to discuss their own futures. So to the extent that a community says, this is the kind of economic development that we want to embrace and put forward, the answer is yes. The bill also includes an amendment to an existing program within the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, which is a grant program that helps to support sort of these local clean energy projects. And so should, for example, we have a big federal stimulus package, which New Mexico is lucky enough to get some resources out of, you could imagine a grant program that might be able to help support initiatives like this in communities. So in that sense, yes.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, it looks like we have answered perhaps not all of the questions about the bill, but certainly all of the questions that have been submitted today. I just want to thank all of the panelists so much for being here. Sponsors, Speaker Brian Egoff, Representative Angelico Rubio, and Representative Melanie Stansberry for being here, as well as members of the community and community organizations. Thank you so much. I'm just going to drop in the chat. We would love for you to follow along with the conversation by using the hashtags on Twitter, Climate Solutions Act and HB9. I've also dropped a link for Power for New Mexico's Facebook page. This has been live streaming on their page, and you'll be able to share it with folks who maybe couldn't make it after this. And we appreciate all of your support and all of your questions, and look forward to continuing that support as the bill moves on towards victory. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for being a part of and supporting this bill.
Thank you.
Have a good day.